The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, I hope you had an excellent weekend. Number of topics to get to tonight that I was kind of saving. I was kind of jockeying back and forth in my mind as to whether I wanted to do something over the weekend. I just said, bro, just chill. There's no urgency. It's the off season. You can knock this stuff out come Monday. So here we are. Number of things took place, and then we'll have more stuff to talk about this week because this is the final week of the off-season program. Mandatory minis are this week, and then the players and the coaches, for that matter, go on their short sabbatical, about 5 weeks or so, and then they'll come back together for training camp, and then the party officially gets started, and we're off and running at that point, which kind of fits in the theme of the crawl, walk, run moniker that we've heard and motto we've heard from Dan Quinn this entire offseason. So hopefully we'll be ready to hit the ground running come training camp late July. That said, we heard from a number of coaches last week. The assistants were made available last week, and I didn't get to all of them. So I talked about special teams coordinator Larry Izzo and the new special teams rules. I think a lot of y'all still need some work there. If y'all got questions, man, please fire away. All right, I got answers for you. So I think a lot of y'all have questions as to this special teams thing and how it's going to work. If you got questions, I've got answers. Fire away. I've done a lot of homework on this and kind of really immerse myself in all of the stuff that's going on with these new rules. And so if you got questions, I think I've got answers. Okay. But we talked about that, but so many other assistants were made available to the media last week. And so I had a chance to kind of take all of that in, took some notes. We'll talk about what those coaches had to say. Somebody sent me a tweet last week, like Friday, Saturday, something like that, where PFF had the ranking of the best guards in the NFL, and Sam Cosmi was third on that list, to which the person that sent me the message said, I don't agree with this, meaning he doesn't think Sam Cosmi is the third best guard in football. And he's not saying that he's one or two either. But he said it's good to know that people are thinking highly of some of our players. I don't know if I disagree. I mean, well, wait, let me say that again. Let me rephrase that. I think I disagree with him. Right now, again, I'm not a PFF guy, and I don't like to use their statistics when they are, suitable for my needs. This just was brought to my doorstep, and I want to discuss it. It made me think of a larger question, though. Who is the best player, pound for pound? Who is the best player on this team? We will discuss that a little bit later on in the show. But first, I want to start tonight's show. Oh, and let me say this before I forget, because my brain is really bad. I know y'all seen that new documentary that the NFL is putting out called "And the Pick Is In." It's going to be on Roku channel. So I don't really know. I know my mom and dad have a Roku TV in their house somewhere, so I'm just going to watch it over there. I think you can download the app though, but unless they have things on that app that interest me, I don't really want to download an app just for one, documentary. So I just watch it at my parents' house. I know they have it. Anyway, we're featured in that documentary, and somebody sent me a message and said, you know what, maybe this is why we haven't seen a lot of draft content coming from our channel, because normally we would have gotten the next episode, the next installment of Commander's Log, and it would have been centered around draft day, right? All of the things that they went through, conversations that they had, the calls. We've heard a lot of the phone calls and whatnot. They put that up on the channel, but we haven't seen the process that they went through and how excited they were, and phone ringing, another team wanting to come up and them saying, nah, we're good, or yes, like the Eagles trade, for instance. I hope that's up there. But we're one of the teams that's featured. Arizona's featured, the Bears are featured, we're featured, among other teams I'm excited. I'm going to talk more about that, though, on the podcast later on tonight. So if you really want to get some in-depth conversation about that, you got to tune into the podcast a little bit later on tonight, because I'll be doing that after this show. But I just wanted to drop that gem on your melon, put that bug in your ear. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. But Washington added another member to their staff, another member to their front office and their personnel. So for years, Malcolm Blacken had been here in some capacity. I talked about it. He'd been here almost like 20 years. Like, he'd been here forever in various roles, but mainly player, development, right? He's the guy that you would always see escorting the players onto, Redskins 1, when they would pick a guy up after being a first round pick. I always remember him talking to Daron Payne, and Payne just looking like kind of in la la land, because, Payne was the shy kid when we drafted him. He's still sort of shy, but I think he's, out of his box now. I think he just is who he is, right? He's not a guy, that's going to talk to you if he doesn't really know you. But, you could tell he was really shy, man, a few words. And Malcolm Blackett was trying to get him to loosen up. And I just remember him being one of those guys that I would always see with these young players when they were drafted. You would hear his name all the time as well. Well, they moved on from him, and now they're bringing in a guy in a similar role that came from the Texans named Dylan Thompson. And, I just want to say that, we don't know the impact that these guys are or aren't going to have. A lot of these names that we've talked about this offseason, they sound like, good hires. They're coming from places where they were well respected, and, they're assuming a similar role, maybe an upgrade in title, whatever the case may be, or just onto a new challenge, whatever the case may be. We feel like Adam Peters has assembled this all-star cast of characters to, help this organization reach heights it hasn't seen since the late 80s, early 90s, right? Return to glory, if you will. And it starts with the foundation being laid. And that foundation for me is having good people and good coaches, right? And good personnel, staff members in place. It starts with the people that are going to be pouring into these players, right? And, I think one of the things we've seen with this staff, and it starts with, I think, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn in particular, is that they're more concerned with the well-being of these players off the field than they are on the field. Obviously, you have to play. They're not going to bring in guys that are scrubs, but they're great players, right? Or great people, right? Like, we're past that phase. We used to do that all the time here, right? We used to get the Boy Scouts and, weren't very good players, but hey, they're great guys. Ding! You want both, right? You want guys that are, good men, right? Good individuals, good people, human beings, but, just as good football players, right? And what they've done effectively to this point is they've brought in people who care about these players beyond the field. Okay. Yes. A main part of the reason you're here is what you can do as a football player. If you weren't good at football, you wouldn't be here. Despite being a really good person, you at home watching this is probably a really good person, but you're probably not really good at football, or not good enough to be playing at an NFL professional level, which is why instead of you playing, you're talking about the NFL, like myself, right? Doesn't mean we're not good people, right? And so I love the fact that they're bringing in people who care about these guys, because one thing athletes can tell very quickly is because they've been pampered their whole lives. They've been catered to. They know who's fake and who's phony. They know who wants something from them. They know they've gone through this so many times. People always want something from you when you're in a position of power. People are always tugging on you. So it's very refreshing when somebody doesn't want anything other than what's for you, what's in the best interest of you, right? I don't want anything from you. I'm here to pour into you. You so often when you're an athlete or you're someone that is a breadwinner or in a position of power, people constantly are taking from you, or you're constantly pouring into other people's cups. But nobody ever stops to fill your cup back up, right? So as an athlete, it's refreshing when you're having someone pour into you, right? And that's what this, player development kind of role is a guy that's here to help you. He's sort of a liaison between the staff and the front office and the player, right? Like, you need somebody when you come in as a young player, someone to come in and give you sort of a voice, right? Give you someone that you can talk to, someone that you can rely on, someone that can be there for you. Because a lot of these guys, for instance, Jaden Daniels, he's never been on the East Coast until now, right? This guy grew up on the left coast his entire life, hadn't left, the left coast until he transferred to LSU. That was his first time leaving the West Coast. And now he's all the way East Coast, had never been to the East Coast. Now this is where he's going to make his, his living at. And so it's a transition for some of these guys. Bobby Wagner talked about it. I've never left the West Coast. Keep in mind, played for the Rams, played pretty much his entire career with the Seahawks, right? He never left the West Coast, played college ball on the left coast, everything. He's never left the left coast. So coming east, he's like, man, I had to adjust to the time schedule. I'm trying to catch some of these NBA playoff games. They come on so late. Like, it's an adjustment, right? Well, this is where guys like Dylan Thompson come into play. And, I'm going to play you a soundbite from Will Anderson Jr., the defensive rookie of the year for the Houston Texans this past season. And he's going to talk about the importance of a guy like Dylan Thompson and what he's meant to them. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell and all of those guys will tell you that this guy was very instrumental in our success as rookies in the NFL because of what he was able to provide for us and what he will do for the Washington Commanders. He's a great guy. And so I want you to take a listen to what they had to say about Dylan Thompson, and I'll add my little 2 cents in, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Take a listen to Will Anderson talking about Washington's new hire, Dylan Thompson.
I just want to know the person, the human Will. Like, who are you outside of football? And spiritually, like your teammates have helped you get to this point. Is there anyone else, whether that's in the locker room or in the league, that's helped you get to where you are right now? Yeah, most definitely. I would say Dylan Thompson. He was our player personnel guy. He's no longer with us. He's with the Washington Commanders. And, you see me, there's no Will Anderson without Dylan Thompson, man. He took our whole rookie class. CJ can attest to the same thing. He'll say the same thing. Tank will say the same thing. Like, he helped his rookie class be able to do so many great things on and off the field, man. And for him, it was always just buried in the football. He was like, I can really care less about the football, Will. I just want to know the person, the human Will. Like, who are you outside of football? And spiritually, he was great. Like, he connected us even more with God, taught us how to be great leaders, how to change our mindsets, things like that. And he's like always one call away. So that's one guy that I can say in the NFL, which you don't see a lot, who is really a great guy that we leaned on.
So what you heard there was Will Anderson essentially saying, look, man, I don't know what kind of a rookie season I would have had without Dylan Thompson. And this guy was there for me whenever I needed him. He was a sounding board of sorts. He was a guy that kind of steered us in the right direction, was able to kind of show us the ropes, but he cared about us more so as people, as human beings, than he did as football players. He cared less about football, to be honest with you. He cared about us. And that means something to these players. You hear that a lot. And this hire falls in line with a lot of the hires that have been made this offseason, because one of the first things you've heard with a lot of the hires is, hey, we want guys that care about these players off the field. Even with these coaches, you hear them in these interviews, and I'm going to talk about some of them today, and they talk about getting to know these players off the field and how important that is. Feeling like if I can, create that connection, that bond with you, I'm going to coach you in a way that someone that doesn't know you as well wouldn't be able to coach you. And you're going to respond to that coaching, and you're going to be receptive to my coaching even more so because of the relationship that we've fostered, right? So it goes both ways. And Dylan Thompson's hire, again, I don't want to act as if I know the magnitude of it. I just know it's another hire in a long list of hires that continues to hammer home the point that this is a different organization and they're looking for quality people. Dan Quinn said it best. It's one of my favorite quotes from him thus far. He wants to do hard shit with good people, and he continues to bring in good people into this organization. High-level quality individuals, enough of those stacked on top of each other, and the results are bound to be success. Bound to be. And so I just continue to be floored at just how many people with high-level credentials and some of the best references we've seen, like this guy's tremendous. We heard from the Detroit Lions GM when we got their assistant GM. We heard about their cap guy that we took from them as well, right? And you hear about, Blackburn from the Ravens and how highly he was thought of in that Ravens organization. And you talk about the guy we got from the NFL front office and how people were gushing about him and how smart he is and how he's really going to help elevate this organization. And you see guys like Dylan Thompson brought in, and you hear players like Will Anderson talking about the impact that he had on him, and CJ Stroud and Tank Dell last year. And this has been a theme all offseason. I can't help but say to myself, wow, we're in one of the best positions we've been in quite some time. From a health standpoint, I can't recollect being in a more healthy, positive space, which is why Brandon McManus had to go, right? We couldn't afford, we had so much positive momentum just building and building and building. We couldn't afford to have a guy like Brandon McManus still here with that foolishness, right? So we just had to move on and we'll figure it out. But too much positive momentum and too much good juju and good vibes to have that, knocked aside by, one guy in Brandon McManus. So just another really solid, rock solid hire by Adam Peters and company as they continue to build this organization. And man, I can't say enough about all of the things that they've done to this point and how well they've constructed the front office, the staff, and the personnel. And again, it's only a matter of time before we start to reap the benefits on the field. If guys like Jaden Daniels are who we think they are, it's only a matter of time before this thing turns around. Could be sooner rather than later. But all I know is it's only a matter of time. You start doing things the right way. I just think about the Detroit Lions. And, even though Ben Johnson isn't, one of our favorite people right now, he talked about, Dan Campbell, and even when they were struggling, talking about, hey, we're in the water, we're in murky waters, we hit an iceberg, but we're going to make it to, the sunshine. We're going to make it to the island, right? To that paradise. But we got to get through this tough period. And I know there are going to be some tough, dark days ahead of us at certain points, right? There are going to be certain points of the season where we go, man, this sucks. But because I've been through similar situations where, a game or two gets away from you and you're like, damn, we should have won that game. I mean, we've been there plenty of times, right? As fans, but you're also going to see the promise. You're also going to see the upside, and you're going to be excited about what's to come. And eventually, we're going to get to a point where we're no longer surprised. We expect success, right? We're no longer shocked when it comes. We're no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. You keep adding quality people, and eventually good things happen for you. So anyway, that was another refreshing hire. I said all of that to say this. That was another refreshing hire. I want to plant this seed. We'll come back to it, see what it manifests. But you guys can start telling me who you think the best player pound for pound is on this roster. There aren't a ton of guys to choose from. And you are more than welcome to pick someone that just got here. Okay, you are not just relegated to picking players that you've seen with your own eyes in a Washington Commanders uniform. You're more than welcome to say, hey, this guy that just got here is the best player on this team. Knock yourself out. But that Sam Cosmi, third best guard conversation that was floating around over the weekend or so got me to thinking exactly who is the best player on this roster anyway, So we'll come back to that, right? But we had a number of coaches speak last week during the third wave of OTAs before we head into these mandatory minis this week to finish up the offseason work. And the assistants had a chance to speak. And, Joe Witt Jr. talked about the importance of these assistants and the job that they're doing, and they're not getting enough credit. Part of that is out of sight, out of mind. You don't see these coaches, you don't hear a lot about them, so nobody's talking about them. But behind the scenes, they're putting in the work clearly. And without these, coaches doing a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the results that you see don't happen, right? So let's talk about what some of these coaches had to say and get into some of the vibe that you're seeing from this staff as it pertains to these players. Daryl Tapp had, a lot to say, and between he and Ken Norton, I think those two groups need to be at the forefront of this defense for it to be as successful as we want it to be. While I think there is some talent on the back end in the secondary, there are more question marks on that back end than there are in the front seven. You may argue that, we don't actually have a starting caliber defensive end opposite of Dorrance Armstrong, and I tell you, you're probably right. However, you can get by with that because of the Bama wall, the addition of Johnny Newton via the draft, and assuming health, obviously, and the additions of a Cleveland Farrell, a Dante Fowler Jr., F.A. Obata coming back. You have more than enough to get by, right? That cluster, that's the word I was looking for. That cluster of Obata, Fowler Jr., and Farrell will be more than enough, along with Dorrance Armstrong in a rotational capacity. Those guys will be enough mixed around those two behemoths inside, along with Johnny Newton, who we think is going to be a stud as well. So I think the D-line is going to be just fine. Linebackers, you could argue, is the strength of this team right now. And that's without even figuring out what the hell Jamin Davis's role is going to be. So the back end is the one that's a little iffy right now. You're not really sure. But if the front seven's doing their job at a high level, it'll make the back end's job that much easier, right? So Daryl Tapp talked about a number of things. And so the first thing he said is he's a high energy, high intensity coach. He said in order to be a good defensive line coach, you probably have to be. It's one of those groups that demands that you have a ton of energy, that you're high intensity. You got to get those guys motivated and going. And they're big guys. And so when they get tired, you got to be on them to get them to push through that fatigue. Unlike some of these other positions where they're trained to go, right? Even when they're tired, they're trained to push through. These big guys, not necessarily. So you got to push these guys and you got to get the most out of them. And him being a former defensive lineman himself, he knows all about that. He said he loves coaching the Bama wall, and he's really impressed with their attention to detail in the classroom. He knew how good they were as players on the field, but he didn't know how locked in they were in the classroom. He's like, these are real students of the game. And it's that type of behavior in the classroom that spreads to the other guys. When they see their two best players, in that room, taking notes, asking questions, being on top of everything, it spreads like wildfire, So he's been not only impressed with them on the field, but in the classroom in particular, and how well they've been on top of the attention to the detail and how locked in they've been in the classroom. So he said he loves these, two guys in the middle, and he thinks they're going to be the anchor of this defense, which we already know. He talked about each of the guys that they added in the offseason at defensive end: Dante Fowler Jr., Dorrance Armstrong, and Cleveland Farrell. He started with Cleveland Farrell. He called him his baby because he had Cleveland Farrell in San Francisco. And he's like, that's my guy. I know what to expect from him. Unlike the two Dallas dudes who Coach Quinn, Witt Jr., and Sharif Floyd, who is the assistant defensive line coach. I was looking, I don't know about you guys, but I've just been so blown away by this offseason. I had to go back and look at the entire staff that's been assembled because it's an impressive group. And we talked about this in the moment when it was being assembled, because it seemed like we were adding really good coaches time after time after time after time, right? And he mentioned that Sharif Floyd was in Dallas last year, and he had the other two guys, Dante Fowler Jr. and Dorrance Armstrong. And I just thought about Sharif Floyd. I'm like, damn, that's right. He is on this staff. So it made me go back and look at the staff, right? And we talked about this in the moment. It's a well put together staff with veteran teachers, guys that have coached for, 2 decades, a decade plus. And then it's guys that used to be coaches or players who just got into the coaching profession maybe 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago. They've been coaching for a little while now, but they're just really getting their feet wet, just really becoming comfortable with being coaches, getting a real good feel for who they are as coaches and their style. And that's always positive to have two guys that aren't that far removed from playing, because they can relate to the players, right? I think that was one of the biggest disconnects from the last staff, is that they were so old school and they were so stuck in their ways, and we didn't have a lot of young coaches on the staff. It was a lot of old curmudgeon coaches, so they couldn't really relate to the younger players. When you look at this staff, it's a really good mesh, right? Of the Ken Nortons and the Joe Witt Juniors and, Dan Quinn and guys like that who have been coaching forever. Bobby Ingram has been coaching receivers for probably over a decade now, right? And then you got the guys who are kind of young to the profession, like Sharif Floyd, like a William Gay, right, in the secondary. There are a number of those types of coaches scattered amongst the group as well. Sharif Floyd, and then, Daryl Tapp, I think he's only been coaching maybe 4 or 5 years himself. He used to be a player, as you guys all know. So, this is a really, really good group. And he talked about Cleveland Farrell, and he said he's a leader, he's a hard worker, and he said this mission is personal to him, much like it is to Daryl Tapp. Remember, Tapp grew up in the 757, right? And Cleveland Farrell grew up in the 804 in the Richmond area. And he talked about that when we signed him. And so he's like, yo, I know what I'm getting out of Cleveland Farrell. Hard worker, consistent. I know what I'm getting day after day after day. Guy's going to show up. He's going to work hard on the field, in the weight room. He's going to be a leader. He's going to be a guy that leads by example. He's the kind of guy you want on your team, which is why the Raiders drafted him where they drafted him. I remember this like it was yesterday. A lot of people, and Mike Mayock knew that he was going to be criticized for the pick. But he said after the fact, we wanted to set the tone, and we knew what kind of a player and a guy, more importantly, Cleveland Farrell was. And coming in with John Gruden, we wanted to set the tone for what kind of players were going to be Raiders. And Farrell was the exemplary type of player that we were looking for. So that was the tone setter. He was the tone setter. And that's the kind of guy we're getting. Not to mention he's a solid football player. Again, not much of a pass rusher, but he's going to set a physical edge in the run game. He's going to stop the run. He's going to do all the things that you expect a solid backup rotational defensive end to be able to do. He's just going to be starting for us. And he's capable of starting first to second down. Then when you get into those obvious passing situations, you just take him off the field, right? So he serves a role here, not just as a leader, but a guy that can actually give you quality snaps and serve a role on this defense. He talked about Dorrance Armstrong, and he's like, he knows the staff. He's trending upward. You know, his best football is ahead of him, which I think that's the case. I wouldn't be shocked if this dude was able to amass 10 sacks this year. He's never done it in his career. He's been knocking on the door here of late. I wouldn't be shocked if he finally broke through this year, right? He's a really good football player. He talked about him, and he said, you know, he's one of those guys that understands, you know, what the staff is looking for, right? And he's like, a lot of people who, you know, aren't really familiar with this game don't know about Dorrance Armstrong, but this guy can play football. I remember really liking him coming out of Kansas, and then he had a really poor combine, and people soured on him. But I just said, man, he's a good football player. And I'm glad to see that things ended up working out for him. And then he talked about Dante Fowler Jr., and he's like, look, he's explosive, he's twitchy. You can understand why he's a first-round pick. He continues to keep those same traits and qualities about himself. He's a guy that can get in the game and immediately impact the game. And that's why I said he's the kind of guy that I like in a limited role. I don't need him playing 62 snaps in a game. That's way too many, right? Give me my Dante Fowler in 25 to 30 snap increments, and I'm fine with that, right? We play 74 defensive snaps, and he only plays 27. That's perfect. You know, that's exactly what I'm looking for from Dante Fowler Jr., right? He's going to be really good for us. He'll be the best platoon edge rusher we've had in Washington in quite some time. He's literally a specialist at this point of his career. We haven't had a really good specialist. I mean, when's the last time we had one of those, right? I can't even tell you the last time we had a guy that you just said, hey, it's Junior Gillette was supposed to be that for us. He never stayed healthy, right? But I can't think of the last time we had a guy that you just said, hey, it's third down, put him in, right? And I'm pretty sure he'll play more than just third down snaps, but that'll be the bulk of the snaps that he does play is in obvious passing situations. Can't think of the last time we had a quality rotational guy that was really a specialist in that particular role. That's actually really nice, you know. Then he talked about getting to know the players outside of football. Do you see the theme here, right? I literally just had a whole conversation about that when talking about Dylan Thompson. And Daryl Tapp said, as a former player, he understands how important it is to establish a relationship with these players. Look, you got a life outside of football. You got some of y'all have families. I mean, whether it's your own family or, you know, your mom, your dad, sister, whomever, right? But some of y'all have a wife and kids and things of that nature. You got other interests outside of football. You have people that you care about. And so I want to know what's important to you, right? I want to get to know you. I want to understand why you do what it is you do. And the more that I know about you, the more that we become, you know, good off the field, the more that you trust me as a coach, the more that I'm able to coach you. And, you know, the better we are together, the more I'm able to get out of you and the more you're able to get out of me. So, again, that's been a common theme amongst this staff. Again, refreshing. And then he talked about, you know, everything is about urgency. He said that everything that they're doing is with urgency. He said now the offseason program has changed since he was a player. You know, they got a lot less time with the players now because of how the players have set it up with the CBA. And so he's like, we got to maximize the time that we have with these players in the offseason. So it's all about, you know, doing everything with intentionality and urgency. And we want to get to the point that when we come back for training camp in July, we hit the ground running. Like, we've done all of the groundwork. We got everybody there'll be a quick little refresher to make sure everybody's on the same page, but we really want to be able to dive in and really start getting to the heavy lifting, especially if you're on the D line or you're, on the O line, those positions that really haven't had that really good work in the offseason, because pads are when they start to do their damage. You really want to get to the point where we've gotten all the technical stuff out of the way, the fundamentals of how we want to do things, how we want to attack, how we want to play. Now it's about going out and executing the actual plays themselves, right? These stunts, these twists, these games that we're going to run, these blitzes, these different coverages and looks. We want to be able to get to that stuff. So we want to teach the fundamentals. We want to teach the style of play that we're going to have. We're going to teach the mentality right now. So when we get to July, we don't have to worry about that. There's no question about how we play, what our style of play is, what our brand is. This is how we do it. This is how we use technique. That's already been done, hammered home in the spring, right? So that was Daryl Tapp. Then we get to linebacker coach Ken Norton Jr. And he talked about Frankie Louvu and his energy just being infectious. He's like, yo, he's one of those guys that his energy just spreads to the entire room. He's infectious. And you love having guys like that because they're going to follow guys like Frankie Louvu, or Oos, as they call him. And I don't know if you guys saw him, but today was media day for a lot of the, players on the team that the team's going to use to promote. He was one of those guys taking pictures and things of that nature. So you'll probably see those pictures circulating here over the next few days, maybe even month, as things slow down. But, he put out a little quick video for the fan base on social media. But, you could tell that he's an energetic guy. I talked about his, play on the field, and that speaks volumes to me. I fell in love with him in Carolina. Like, I don't know what he was doing when he was with the Jets, when he first got into the league, but he found his stride in Carolina, and he plays like his hair's on fire, and you can't help but love the way he plays the game of football. So I'm pretty sure his energy is infectious. He talked about Jamin Davis because, a lot of people don't really know where to place Jamin right now. He's kind of in this weird space because we got a middle linebacker now in Bobby Wagner. You got Frankie Louvu as his sidekick, and you expect us to play a lot of two linebacker sets. Like, our base defensive front is probably going to be two linebackers on the field with a Buffalo safety, with that Buffalo nickel, that big safety, right? Whatever they call it. I don't know if they call it Buffalo nickel or if they call it something else. We'll learn the lingo, if it's the same, if it changes. But they're going to play that big nickel with probably three safeties on the field quite often. And Chin will be coming down because Quinn likes those lighter defenders who are faster, more athletic, gives them a little bit of an edge down in the run game in terms of speed and quickness attacking the offensive line. But where does Jamin Davis fit into all of this? If you got your two backers, it'll be on the field for the most part. And, we've been hearing a lot about him rushing the quarterback. He's talking about wanting to hunt QBs. And a lot of people are getting excited about what Jamin Davis could potentially be as a pass rusher, which is cool. But he's never done it before. And I've been seeing ridiculous, videos of people saying crazy stuff like he could be the next Michael Parsons. I wouldn't get too carried away with that. He might actually be a really good blitzer, and he may actually be able to, but there aren't many Michael Parsons out there. Guys don't move like Michael Parsons moves out on the football field. He's a different breed. You should know. We watched him terrorize us for the last 3 years, I think it is now. So we should all be aware about how dominant Michael Parsons can be. Whatever the case may be, Jamin Davis may ultimately be a really good pass rusher, but people are trying to figure out where does he fit into all of this. And Ken Norton was like, look, the best teams that I've coached on have had depth at, multiple positions, linebacker being one of them. And you got to be able to have guys that can step in and play. And then Jamin looks the part. He's like, Jamin looks like he should be out here tearing some shit up pretty much. So ultimately, they're going to find a way to get them on the field. Unlike the last group who struggled with getting players on the field. This group is like, that's why Joe Witt Jr. said, hey, we don't have 11 starters. So don't ask me who's starting, okay? We have 17 or 18 dudes that we're going to roll up with. We rolling up 17 or 18 deep. We come into your city, your town, we wrecking shop, and we leaving after we rough you up with our 17 or 18 dudes, okay? And we gonna rough teams up. That's how we roll. That's how we operate. So don't ask me who's starting. Jamie Davis is one of those 17, 18 dudes. That's all we need to know. They asked Ken Norton Jr., Coach Norton, about what has he seen in Jordan McGee thus far? And, when you start to hear the same thing over and over again about a player, then you start to feel like, okay, this is true. Like, this is the assessment. Dan Quinn talked about McGee and, how he carries himself. Joe Witt Jr., I thought, had the most insightful analysis of him when he said he carries himself like a veteran. You wouldn't even know that he's a rookie. He carries himself like a 7-year pro. He fits right in with the room, right? Then, Ken Norton Jr. says he's accountable. He's a guy that's very smart, studies in the classroom, applies it on the football field, rarely makes the same mistake twice. He's just a guy that you feel really good about, and you wouldn't know he was a rookie. He feels like a veteran already. That's the second time we've heard that. I'm telling you, this dude is going to be ready to step in for us next year. I really feel like that. Really feel like, and Daniel Jeremiah said, I couldn't get a lot of people with me on this guy, but I like this guy. Daniel Jeremiah said that with his own mouth during the combine. I like this dude. I think he can play. I second that. And learning from Bobby Wagner this year, going to Bobby Wagner apprenticeship school, and then taking what he learned and applying it next year, I think Jordan McGee is going to be really good for us in the future. I really like that. Ken Norton Jr. also talked about leadership being important on all of the successful teams he's been a part of, including being a player. And remember, he was one of the best leaders. One of my favorite quotes from a player is from Ken Norton Jr. When he went to the 49ers after leaving Dallas. He was one of the few players in the NFL at the time who had won, consecutive Super Bowls. He had won 3 in a row, which at that time, I don't think there were many players who had done that, but with 2 different teams. He had won 2 in a row with Dallas. Then he got traded to, or I think he left in free agency and went to the 49ers and won the Super Bowl that next year in 94, right? He won 92, 93 with Dallas and then went to the 49ers and won in 94. And I just remember him, they talked about the 49ers defense being soft, right? That was the knock on the 49ers. Their defense was soft. And he said, they called us soft. He said, but we were unconscious. I love that clip of him talking his talk in the locker room. And, it got me to thinking about something that I talked about last week and I've talked about before with the last group, and us just not having a lot of veteran leadership in the locker room, right? Because of how they did things before, how Ron had done things in Carolina, he was a little hesitant to keep guys, past their prime essentially. And so we didn't have a lot of leadership. When you think about it, we didn't have a lot of leaders. It was a lot of young guys, a lot of young, the blind leading the blind, essentially. And, I think there's a good mixture of veterans and young guys in the locker room. And I think that leadership is going to pay off because eventually we're going to be a young team again. A lot of these veterans that, the oldest players on the team, the Zach Ertz and the Bobby Wagner, those dudes are on 1-year deals. Like, don't expect most of those guys to be back next year. Right? They're here essentially to mentor the young guys that they took at those positions to help, us get to where we need to be next year to be ready to compete, because we're not ready right now, not on paper at least, Theoretically speaking, we're not supposed to be, but you never know. This is why they play the game. But they're supposed to help these guys be ready so that next year, when those guys are no longer here, they can step into those roles and be ready to lead, right? So I think that leadership piece is important. It's very important. When, like last year, when things started to fall apart, who stepped up? Like, guys were frustrated. Normally, Terry steps up. Normally, Jonathan Allen steps up. Those guys were so frustrated with the way things were going that they didn't say shit last year. They said nothing. They were so fed up. Jonathan Allen was more concerned about wanting to get the hell out of here. Terry was talking about running wind sprints. Those guys were so frustrated. They weren't trying to get the rest of the troops to focus on the next game the following week. They're like, man, F this shit. Ready for this season to be over with. It was a lot of I, and me talk last year. If you listen to those guys in the locker room, I can only control what I can control. So I'm going to just focus on me and what I got to do. It was a lot of that shit last year. So I think it's important. Having leadership is important. And then, Ken Norton, brought this up indirectly. He didn't actually say this, but him saying some of the things he said and the question, the way it was phrased, made me think about this particular part of this discussion that we're about to have. So the uniqueness about our linebacker room, think about it like this. Every guy in our locker room is at a different point of their career, right? Check this out. Obviously, Bobby Wagner has had a storied career. He's a Hall of Famer. The day he retires, he's a Hall of Famer 4 years from that point, right? So he's already in the twilight of his career. Whatever he's doing now is bonus time, okay? He's gone through all the levels. He's already beaten the game. Now he's playing bonus levels at this point. Then you have Frankie Louvu, cut his teeth in the league the hard way, undrafted, got cut, found his way to Carolina, figured it out. Now he's on that second contract, and he's going into the prime of his career, right? Jamin Davis is still on his rookie deal. They did not pick up the fifth-year option. This is his contract season. He's trying to figure out who he is as a football player. Maybe this new role that they may carve out for him as a pass rusher may redefine his career and give him sticking power and real earning potential in free agency in the upcoming year. Who's to say? But he's still figuring out what his niche is in the NFL, right? Going into year 4. And then there's Jordan McGee, fresh out of the packaging, brand new to the NFL, rookie season. So you see how everybody's trying to learn from all these veteran players who are at different stages of their career, kind of taking a little bit from each and every single one of them and applying it to his game. You see how this is a unique room? I thought about that and I said, wow, that's pretty cool, right? Nobody's at the same point of their careers. Everybody's at a different point. We'll see how all that kind of comes together, that melting pot, if you will, and what it produces at the linebacker position. So one of the guys that Joe Witt Jr. talked about needing to get more credit was one of his guys, right, that he brought in here, Jason Simmons, the defensive pass game coordinator. I've talked about this already and said, I don't recall us, and again, you might be able to go back and find times where we had defensive pass game coordinators and offensive run game coordinators and offensive pass game coordinator. I just don't recall us having those types of guys, specialized roles. You might have had a guy doubling as that, but he was really the tight ends coach, but he was the run game, coordinator, but he was really the tight ends coach, right? I don't recall a guy not having any other title but defensive pass game coordinator. Like, that's the stuff that other teams did that I didn't feel like we did, right? We're catching up to the rest of the league. Like, we actually have real analytics. We actually have, real specialized roles for players on the field. We haven't had a pass rusher, a specialized pass rusher who comes off the bench on 3rd and 8, and you know what he's coming in the game to do. I can't tell you the last time we've had one of those. That's fun, right? That's refreshing for me. We got a guy that is literally his focus is how do we improve pass defense? How do we get the best, like this team we're playing this week, what do they do best? And how do we attack that with our pass, game defense? Like, what are some of the things that we can do to strengthen our pass defense this week? How do we attack what they like to do through the air? That's great. Feels like we're way behind and we're catching up, but it's great. He talked about collaborative energy amongst the coaching staff. And that's been a phrase we've heard all offseason about collaborative. Everything's collaborative, collaboration. Everybody's doing things together. And, he talked about what Joe Witt Jr. had to say. And he said a lot of that is, us getting together as a staff and kind of figuring out, how all of the different things that we've done over the life of our careers, the different backgrounds that we have, how can we mesh all of this together and make it come together as one that's going to put our players in the best positions to succeed? He said, look, Joe Witt Jr. is smart enough to do this on his own. He doesn't need us necessarily to give him input. This man, remember, I told you that Joe Witt Jr. told us I was ready for this position as defensive coordinator back in like 2011 after we won the Super Bowl with the Packers. I think they won it in 2010. He said, I was ready then for a defensive coordinator job. That was 14 years ago. So he's been buying his time, waiting for his opportunity. So he's got so many ideas of how he wants to do things. And Jason Simmons is like, bro, he don't need us. He can do this shit on his own. But he's selfless enough. He's good enough as a communicator. And he's got the ability to put his ego aside and say, no, how can we as a group coach this team up, these players up, and get them in the best positions to be successful? And he said, we appreciate that as coaches. Our voices are being heard. So it makes us want to put the input in even more so. It makes us want to go even harder. He talked about building a foundation. During the offseason, he said, this is the time where you build a foundation. You lay that foundation. You lay that concrete. And he said, this is what our foundation is as a defense. Effort, discipline, discipline, and communication. And he's really more so talking about the back end because he's a defensive pass game coordinator. So he's more so talking about the back end. And we've heard discipline before. Like Jack Del Rio used to talk about discipline, or he would call them eye violations. When guys their eyes wouldn't be in the right spaces, he called them eye violations. Okay. He said, we committed too many eye violations today. That's what got us in trouble. So eye discipline is key. Quarterback's eyes are taking you somewhere. You follow his eyes. And a lot of times he'll take you to football. Sometimes quarterbacks can manipulate. Only the best of the best manipulate you with their eyes, right? Most young quarterbacks, they stare it down, and that's where they're going with football. So your eye discipline needs to be, where it's supposed to be, because he'll take you to where the action is, right? And then communication. What have we heard all offseason long about defensively, what they're going to do? Communication, right? He talked about that all offseason. We just heard from Coach Joe Witt Jr. on this needs to be a chatty defense, right? So he's like, effort, because that you can't coach effort, right? Or you can, but either you got it or you don't. And effort is a mindset, okay, which is what you can instill as a coach's staff. I always liken tackling to rebounding in basketball. That's the effort thing. If you 6'10" and you averaging 4 boards a game, that's because you don't want to rebound. Unless you're blocking shots, so you all over the place and you can't crash the glass, if you're big, you should be averaging almost 10 rebounds a game. That's a want-to thing, though. Right? Same with tackling, especially in the secondary. I don't care how Emmanuel Forbes can tackle if he wants to. That shit don't matter how big you are. You can get guys on the ground if you want to. It's a mindset. So is effort. It's a mindset. Eye discipline and communication. Those were the three foundational building blocks he talked about this offseason. He said communication has been the most impressive attribute thus far this offseason. He's like, I've been really impressed with how these guys have communicated, whether it's the linebackers communicating to the defensive line or the linebackers communicate to the safeties or vice versa, the safeties and the defensive backs communicating to the linebackers. Everybody getting on the same page and one accord. That's going to be important for this defense to be successful, is, again, being a chatty defense. He said these guys are ahead of schedule from a communication standpoint. Really like to see that. He reiterated that the motto is run and hit defense. He said, we're going to run and we're going to hit. And, he said Coach Joe Witt Jr. has already expressed that, and that's who we're going to be. We're going to run and we're going to hit. Again, music to my ears, right? All of our ears. There have been times where we felt like this defense has been too soft or lacked effort. I don't think I already know we're not going to see that. A lot of people, I had somebody ask me on the last show, why are you so confident in the defense? Because of the coaching staff. That's why. I've seen, Dan Quinn coach defenses and how they operate and how they move. And Dorrance Armstrong said, bro, it's a mindset. Like, this ain't for everybody. And we heard Joe Witt Jr. say that. This ain't for everybody. And so Dorrance Armstrong was like, yeah, no, this ain't for everybody. They force you to do things that, as a player, you really don't want to do. But if you do them, the results are endless, right? You're going to see it. And then, Jason Simmons made me think about, this has nothing to do with nothing. I won't spend a lot of time on it because some of y'all probably don't even care about this. But as human beings, as a human being myself that is very compassionate to others and for others, he talked about the craziness of the offseason. He's like, bro, we really haven't had a chance to settle in. Like, it's dudes that's probably like renting, some people that's actually like maybe staying somewhere that's not going to be their, ultimate dwelling. Like, a lot of these dudes came from their last situation and they came straight in and they started working. I remember them telling us, because they came in right around combine time. A lot of these dudes were hired right around combine time, which was that late February, early March time frame. And they hit the ground running, right? They had to learn each other as coaches. Then they had to learn the players that they already had. Then they had to start figuring out what players we want in free agency, right? And then once that happened, all right, now we got to turn our attention to the draft. We need your help on trying to identify players that are going to be, Commanders tag players, right? Guys that we tag with that Commanders label that we feel like are going to fit what it is we want to do. And then once we get those players in here, then you got veteran camp before the rookies showed up. Then once they drafted the rookies, then you had rookie camp pretty much right there afterwards. Then you had everybody there right after that. And it's just been this constant go, 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 go. He's like, bro, we haven't had a chance to breathe yet. Everybody's had their head down. He's like, some of these dudes, I don't even know where they living at, where they staying at. He's like, for me, I've just been on the go. I'm not even unpacked yet. I haven't even opened my suitcase. So that's crazy to hear. He's been here since February, late February, early March. We are in June. Being a football coach is not for everybody, is essentially what I'm trying to get at. Like, I don't know of a profession in all of the major sports. I don't know if there's a sport where the coaches work harder than football. Because in basketball, yes, there are more games, just like baseball, way more games. But it's like there's so much attention to detail, so much that goes into one game, right? With baseball, it's 162 of these bitches. We don't get them tonight, we'll get them tomorrow. We don't get them tomorrow, we'll get them the night after that. Or you know what? We see them in a series in 3 weeks, we'll get them back next time, right? There's always a next time in baseball, it feels like. In basketball, it's a grind. Sometimes you're playing, in 3 different cities and 6 nights. And, you're on this road trip and, it's 4 games in 6 nights. It's tough, right? Taxing on the body, XYZ, yada, yada, yada. But it's still that same mentality of, hey, we'll get them next time, right? That's just one of 82. It's every game in the NFL matters. And you're cramming in all of this information into 1 week to try to go out and win a game, and then you reset and do it all over again immediately. And it starts in the offseason. And when you're going into a new environment, it's just crazy how much time and effort you have to put in. And really, we talked about this. The NFL is a year-round sport. It's a year-round sport. Hold on 1 second, y'all. My bad. It's a year-round sport, and they only get this 1 month off. This little 5-week period here from mid-June to late July is it. They're going to be working the rest of the year, in the next year, and they're going to do it all over again, right? Then they get that break again in June. So it's crazy. So it's just I just wanted to bring that up. We're from tight end coach David Rye, and he talked about Ben Sinnott. Ben Sinnott. I got to stop doing that. I haven't done that in a long time. I've actually been pretty good with that. But Ben Sinnott, and he said about Ben Sinnott, he's smart, he's tough, and he loves football. Those were the 3 qualities that led us to drafting him, is that he aligned with what it was we were looking for specifically at that position. And really, that's what they're looking for at any position, but specifically tight end. And he said that he's been a joy to coach, but Ryan he spoke really highly of the entire tight end room. I really wanted to hear him be asked specifically about Amani Rodgers, but that didn't happen. He was asked about Cole Turner and John Bates, and he just gave a standard blanket answer like, those guys they're pros. They work extremely hard. They're such a joy to coach because they come in with the right mindset and attitude, and all of the stuff you expect a coach to say this time of the year. I really wanted to know how he felt about Amani Rodgers and the progress he's made from his injury, and more importantly, his athleticism, which nobody else has on this roster. That's the one thing that's going to allow him to stand out from the rest of the group. And you can see it this time of the year, right? Unlike some of the other guys where, their toughness or their ability to block will shine through when the pads go on. This is Amani Rodgers' time of the year. This is when he's allowed to shine because he's an athlete. So this is when you should be able to see him go out there and make plays. I wanted to know if he was seeing any of that, but we didn't hear that from him. But he did talk about this time of the year, it is imperative that you teach fundamentals and technique. He says that's what they're honing in on, because once you get to camp, when they put the pads on, you want all of that stuff to be behind you. You want it to be muscle memory at that point. So you're not thinking about having to where your hands go, or, foot placement, or, what step to take on an initial block, what initial step to take on a block, this, that, or the third. We worked on all that stuff in the offseason. So now your mind should be trained to just do it. Like, it shouldn't even be something that you think of. It should be second nature, right? You wrap it over and over and over again until it becomes second nature and muscle memory. So, they're working on the fundamentals, they're working on the technique, and trying to get to a place where they're comfortable so that when the pads go on in training camp, they're ready to rock and roll. So then you get to O-line Bobby Johnson. And I know a lot of people, including myself, are skeptical with him. And it just so happens that he's coaching the one position that we don't have ultimate confidence in. So it's the worst. It's kind of the worst of both situations. Like, not only are we not sure about you as a coach, but we're not really sure about the position that you're coaching. So it's almost like a double whammy, so to speak. We're hoping that we're wrong about him. I think most of us are like, yeah, we don't know about you, but we're going to give you a chance. And then some people are like, yo, he sucks. We'll see, right? And we'll see about the parts that he's being given to see if he can get the job done or not. But he's talked about being pleased with Brandon Coleman, especially in the classroom. He's like, I'm not surprised by anything he's done. We knew we were getting ourselves an elite athlete. We knew we were getting ourselves a guy that was fully capable of playing both guard and tackle, which they're working him at both currently. So he's like, none of that surprised us. We knew what we were getting. He said, what has surprised me, he said, I wouldn't even say surprised. He said, what has I've been really pleased with is his attention to detail in the classroom. He's like, he pays attention so much so that he asks really astute questions, questions that you don't expect a rookie to ask. And he said the amount of attention to detail he's paid in the classroom has allowed him to take that information and then apply it on the field. And so he's maybe a little bit further ahead of where they thought he might be at this point. Doesn't mean anything because, again, the pads haven't come on yet. But just from a mental standpoint, half the battle is being mentally prepared. And they feel like Brandon Coleman, or at least O-line Bobby Johnson feels like Brandon Coleman is prepared from that standpoint. He talked about the crawl, walk, run moniker that we've heard from head coach Dan Quinn this offseason. And he's, the question was really geared towards Brandon Coleman, but he's like, that doesn't just apply to Coleman. It applies to everybody because it's a new offense for everybody. It's not like, the veterans that have been here are in year 3 of a system and Coleman's coming in and trying to catch up. Everybody's learning a new system. So it ain't just Coleman that's got to go through that crawl, walk, run phase. It's everybody. But he said, I've been really pleased with, the progress that's being made, especially with, a young guy like Coleman. He's already in that, walk phase, and they're hoping that by the time we get to camp, everybody, not just Coleman, is ready to run, right? And O-line Bobby Johnson preached competition, competition, competition. He's like, I heard the word competition out of his mouth, or competitive, like 50 million times. Like, okay, guy, we get it. Competition, we get it, right? But that's been the moniker all offseason. That's what we've heard from every coach. Like, these guys are out here competing, which is what you hear this time of the year, right? Anyway, his best line was, we're asking the players to strain now so that we see the results later, right? If they put in the work now, right, they strain now in the offseason, the results will come when it matters most. And that's been his, philosophical approach is, look, I'm asking you to do a lot. I'm going to ask you to switch. He's like, and I know, going back and kind of listening to some of the things he had to say when he was with the Giants, and even going back as far as when he was with Buffalo, one of the things he likes to do in the offseason, or in camp rather, is he likes to take guys and play around with them at different positions, right? Pause. Putting them at guard, at tackle. If you could play guard and center, and we're going to move you around, different combinations, because you got to be ready, because you just don't know what's going to happen, during the season, or even in the course of a game, right? Remember that time where, we had so many injuries to the offensive line. Trent Williams had to kick down the guard so that Ty Nsekhe could finish the game at tackle. And we finished off the Giants with Trent Williams crushing them as a guard. And it started that crazy conversation of maybe we should put our 5 best offensive linemen on the field, which would include Ty Nsekhe at left tackle and Trent Williams at left guard, because we were so dominant in the run game at the end of that game, running behind Trent and Ty Nsekhe. But you weren't going to move Trent Williams to guard. That's crazy talk, right? But it's that same mindset, though. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen in the course of a game, and you may have to shuffle the deck. Remember the time where Morgan Moses had to move to left tackle because we had so many injuries, so that the Florida tackle could come in and play right tackle? Remember that? So you just don't know, right? It's impossible to know what's going to happen, but you want to be prepared. You want to be prepared. Strain now so you can have results later. And then lastly, we heard from running backs coach, or I heard from running backs coach Anthony Lynn. And Anthony Lynn pretty much, I don't want to say he dismissed this time of the year, but he was pretty much like, bro, this is essentially passing camp. Like, which is what Dan Quinn said. Like, I don't really know, like, as a running backs coach, I don't really have nothing for you. You know, all I can do is work on the fundamentals, you know, get my guys ready so that when the pads come on, you know, I can see if they can catch, you know, all of that good stuff, agility, the little things, work on pass protection. But again, we can work on the techniques and the fundamentals of pass protection. But when them pads come on and you got a dude charging at you running full speed, what you going to do, right? A little different. So he was like, yo, it's really OTA. I ain't got nothing for you, bro. Be honest with you. He did give us this. He said Chris Rodriguez Jr.'s first step is very explosive. And he said he's got better hands than he expected. So that's the first time I've heard anything positive about Chris Rodriguez Jr. this offseason, which is a good thing because they brought in two guys. Their activity on the priority free agent market after the draft was very telling. Okay. The moves that they made were very intentional. They went specifically after positions that they weren't sure about. Okay. And so running back was one of them. They didn't add just one running back. They added two running backs. So that tells you that they were like, yeah, I'm not really sure about the back end of that group. We know about the first two guys in Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. Not really sure what we have after that. Well, Chris Rodriguez Jr. getting some praise from running backs coach Anthony Lynn is a really good thing, right? So we'll see if I think ultimately I think he's going to end up on this roster. You know, the question for me right now at running back is it 3 or 4 that you're keeping? That'll tell me a lot. If it's 3, then we'll see see if any of those young guys can do enough. Michael Wiley is the guy that I've got my eye on out of Arizona, the undrafted rookie out of Arizona, but and he's a long shot still, right? But if it's 4, he's safe. He's not going anywhere, right? So we'll see, right? We'll see what happens. At the end of the day, we heard from a lot of those assistants. It was good to hear from them and I told you this time of the year, I'm more interested in what the coaches and the players have to say than I am anything that's actually happening out on the field. My interest level will peak when we get to camp. Now I'm interested in what's going on a day-to-day basis, what guys are getting better, what guys are having good reps, what guys are struggling. And then you want to see some of those things, you know, especially with the young guys that are going to play a lot in the preseason. You want to see that then transfer over to the field if they're having success. If they're struggling, you would like to see them, you know, play better than what they've been doing and demonstrating in camp. And you'll, again, a lot of that will be playing time will be divvied up based off of, you know, what you've shown them in camp. Do you have the ability to get snaps because of things you've done in camp? Caught the eye of a coach or two, right? We'll see. All right. So I posed a question to you guys at the top of the show. Best player pound for pound on this roster is who? Best player on this roster. I don't think there are a bunch of choices, honestly speaking. We're not a super talented roster, okay? When I think about best player on the roster, I start thinking about guys that you look at and you say, amongst their position in the league, are they among the best? Are they close to the top at their particular positional group? Okay. If we're listing 7 of the best players in the league, does that guy get mentioned in that group? He may be closer to 7 than 1, but the fact that he's in that conversation means he's one of the best in the league at that position. Hence, he's one of the best players on our team. We don't have many of those. Okay. There may be 3 or 4 of those guys max. I think when you have this discussion with us in particular, you probably got to lower the bar a little bit than you would say if you were talking about a super talented team like a Buffalo or a San Francisco or a Kansas City, where you would elevate that bar, and make it really high because you got a lot of really high level, high talent, players that are among the best at their position, right? That's not us. So when you bring up a guy like, say, Terry McLaurin, who is definitely not top 7 in the league at receiver, probably not even, he's not top 10. We could make a list of receivers in this league, get through probably 12 of them before Terry even starts to come into the conversation, realistically. I think he's somewhere in that 12 to 15 range, probably, when it's all said and done, if we were to sit down and make a list of the best receivers in the league. But Terry's going to be considered pound for pound one of the best players on this team, right? We don't have a ton. But when I think about best player, again, if we're having a conversation about the best players in the league at that position, does that guy's name come up? Right now, I can only think of maybe 4 guys that may be in that real conversation. And then Terry probably would be a 5th, even though he wouldn't be in that conversation at receiver. Most people, when they talk about the Commanders roster, Terry McLaurin is one of the first names that they rattle off, for good reason, I may add. But I think the 4 guys that probably deserve consideration for this conversation, and then you would add Terry in, are Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, obviously, Sam Cosmi, and Tress Way. Those are the 5 guys, with Terry included, that I think are in this conversation. Did I miss anybody? Is there another guy on this team that you think deserves that kind of attention? Wagner, once upon a time, was definitely amongst the best of his positional group. I don't think he is that anymore. I still think, though, he's still in a conversation for among the most productive, but productive and dynamic and elite are 2 different things. You can be a high productivity guy, but not necessarily a game changer, right? You do your job really well, right? Get guys on the ground, but you're not taking the ball away, getting sacks, really altering the game. You're just, when the ball comes your way, you make it, you make a play, get guys on the ground. So I think Louie has a chance to get into that conversation this year, because I think he's just starting to get on people's radar with the season he turned in last year. I mean, if you go back and look at the year he had prior to that too, he was really good. But last year, I think people really started to take notice. I'm still shocked that Carolina let him out of the building. But their loss is our game for sure. And I think one more big season from Frankie Louie, and he could be in that conversation. But if we're talking right now, so here's the thing. I think this is a big season for 2 guys in particular. Daron Payne and Sam Cosmi. Here's why. So, spoiler alert, those are the 2 guys that I'd be picking from. So, for Cosmi, last year was the first true season that he settled in at a position and stayed healthy, which was the right guard. Like, they'd been toggling back and forth between tackle and guard. They really drafted him to be a tackle. They wanted him to play tackle. I think he could play tackle, but I think he's a better guard. And to me, I'm not in the business of which one, benefits us more, even though you might be a lesser player at that position. I'm more of the idea of where can you be at your best? We can find somebody else to play tackle if you're not better at tackle than you are at guard. If you're an okay guard, just look at it from this perspective. If you're a C- student at tackle, but you're a B+ A guard, what are we talking about? Just because you can play tackle and it's a harder position, by design to fill, doesn't mean I take you because you can do it technically and put you there, but you could be a Pro Bowl, all-pro type guard. Why would I do that? That makes zero sense, right? So, and I'm not saying Cosme's a C- tackle. He just never really stayed healthy for us to really figure it out. I just think he's more comfortable now that he's settled in the guard and he played so well. And I think one of the issues he had sometimes was space, dealing with guys with real speed out in space, even though he's a tremendous athlete himself. You stick a guy inside, there's less space for guys to, have and maneuver with. And I just think he's a natural fit at guard. He was exceptional last year. And I actually think he's better than Brandon Sheriff. I actually thought Brandon Sheriff, when he was here, was overrated. But that's nor here nor there. Thought he was really good. Don't get me wrong. Brandon Sheriff was really good. But there were years where he'd go to the Pro Bowl. I'm like, Brandon Sheriff was not a Pro Bowler this year. One, he didn't play enough. Two, when he did play, he was solid, but he would get beat sometimes. He wasn't dominant like people would like. Sheriff was good. I think Cosme has a chance to be better. I think he has a chance to be better. But it's about consistency. Sheriff, when he did play, was consistent. But that's the thing. That's why it'd be hard for me to say that Cosme is the best player right now, just off of sheer consistency, because we've only seen it for 1 year. When he plays, he's really solid. Last year, he wasn't solid. He was dominant last year. Now it's, can you do it again? I'm big on, all right, that was cool, do it again. Speaking of doing it again, that's why I think this is a big season for Daron Payne. Because last year, that was the first year after the massive deal that he got, and he earned it, 11.5 sacks. He was unblockable in 2022. We didn't get that in 2023. We had that one glimpse. Y'all remember that Denver game? I got so excited. Remember, I cut up all the clips of that one possession. I put it up on IG. And we call that the Daron Payne possession, right? He literally said, good morning, good afternoon, good night, God bless and good night to the Denver Broncos on that drive. Single-handedly destroyed that drive. Tackle for loss on first down. Quarterback, hurry on second down and a sack on third down. Get out of here, right? Like it was the Daron Payne drive, literally. And that's the kind of dominant force he can be when he's locked in. And, he had another really good game against the Falcons. That was the game he was mic'd up, right? And his grandma was like, I saw you toss a whole grown man out of the way, right? He was really good against the Falcons too. But those moments felt like they were too few and far between last year. I expect more from him. I think this group's going to get it out of him. I'm excited to see what he does this year because of all the movement, the blitzes. Like, you can't keep up with everybody. With the way Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., they talk about feeding the studs. Like, they're literally like, that dry-ass shit we were doing with Jack Del Rio didn't really allow these guys to shine. They talk about feeding the studs. They're going to design plays specifically where, hey, we're going to get you a one-on-one matchup on the move where we expect you to win. Like, we setting you up for the dub. Go get it. If you are the dog that you say you are, go hunt, right? I think he's got a chance to have a massive year. And another thing that you don't worry about with Daron Payne, which is why, for me, pound for pound, I think he's the best player on the team right now. And that man shows up every single week. Knock on a little bit of wood, but Deron Payne, I don't know if I don't want to have this conversation. I'm not going to have this conversation because the last time I did that, it was Chase Roulier. We know how that went. I'm just going to say, I know I can rely on him. I'm just going to stop right there. All right. So, who do you guys think is the best player on this team? And if you're watching this on playback, leave it in the comment section. I want to read your comments and see how you guys feel about pound for pound, the best player. And if you say it's Tressway, there's an argument to be made for him as well. And I'm listening. I am all ears. Okay. He's been fantastic. And I still think he's got good football left in him. So let's get to the comment section so I can get you guys out of here. Anthony P. Been a member for 23 months. Almost at that 2-year anniversary, Anthony. Really appreciate you. Who writes, any idea when Daryl's jersey retirement will be? They haven't announced that yet. A lot of fans have been saying it'll probably be against Dallas. I think it's one of two things. It'll either be on because none of our primetime games are at home this year for good reason. We've stunk it up at home. Our best performances on primetime have been on the road, actually, coincidentally enough. So they said, nah, y'all don't get the pleasure of playing at home this year. We go to Cincinnati and we go to the Eagles, right? So it's not going to be on primetime, but I think one of the Dallas games would be a good time, which is when they did Sonny Jurgensen last year, if you recall. They did him, I think it was week 18 last year. And then also, they do the alumni game. That's usually in the middle of the season. That'll be the perfect time because you'll have all of his ex-teammates back at the facility. And, everybody's coming back now because of Josh Harris and how welcoming he's been. So now the John Riggins and all of those guys that have been away for a long time who stayed away from the organization because they couldn't stand Dan Snyder, those guys are back. So if you really truly want to have everybody in town at the same time to honor, one of the greatest players in franchise history, I think the best time to do it would be that alumni weekend. So my guess, my money's on alumni weekend. That's my guess, but we'll see what they decide to do. Nike, been a member for 11 months. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, who do you think is the first coach to be poached? Oh man, that's a tough question. Honestly, it's gonna boil down to the success of the team, right? The success of the team is going to ultimately determine who's going to come after our guys. If the defense is really good, I could see Joe Witt Jr. getting poached in 2 years, right? I could see that happening. I could see a guy like Jason Simmons getting an opportunity to be a defensive coordinator finally, right? Like I could see that happening. If the defensive backs overachieve this year and then next year they're really good again, like he could get some love and some shine. Cliff Kingsbury, obviously, if Jaden Daniels' development is excellent. We saw what one season of Bobby Slowick, having success in Houston with a rookie quarterback did for his coaching profile, right? We saw what it did for his resume. He was in discussions and conversations about getting a head coaching job. I don't think he was ready. And I think his decision to go back to Houston, because I think he could have gotten an opportunity if he would have kept his name in the running. He pulled himself out pretty early, was like, I got a couple of interviews, but I want some more seasoning, right? Which I think was the right thing to do for him. But I think that's a 2-year thing, right? If you do it 2 years in a row, I'm big on do it again. If Bobby Slowick does it again in Houston, he'll be hired this cycle if he wants a job. Obviously, there may be no openings that really intrigue him, but if there are openings that intrigue him, he'll get a job if he does it again with the Texans. And my belief is that everybody that's here is going to need to do it for at least 2 years in a row. And if Cliff does it 2 years in a row with Jaden right out of the gate, I think Cliff is in line to get another head coaching job. But I'd look at the coordinators first, but don't run away from those positional coaches potentially getting an upgrade to offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator as well. Like those guys, we got some really smart, young, hungry, and some wily vets like Jason Simmons, right? Or Brian Johnson as the offensive pass game coordinator, right? Like we got a lot of young, hungry guys that are in a position that, you know, a lot of people are impressed with Brian Johnson. I think a lot of people looked at that Philadelphia situation last year and said, hey, that wasn't on him. That was the dysfunction that was in Philadelphia last year. That wasn't on him. So I could see if the offense goes really well, a guy like Brian Johnson getting the offensive coordinator position. Like it's a lot. Like there's so many really good coaches for the first time in a long time that I wouldn't be shocked if we lost something next year, you know, on the offense or defensive side. I don't think it'll be either of the coordinators. It'll be one of those positional coaches or one of those specialist coaches. But I can see one of them getting promoted to coordinator and getting an opportunity to call their own plays. So the first guy to go, I think, is going to be Joe Witt Jr., though, unfortunately. I think he'll be the first. And I'll be happy for him. I'm rooting for him, right? Took him a long time to get this opportunity to be a coordinator. I don't think he's going to miss, to be honest with you. I think he's going to crush it. And I think he's going to crush it in a way that's going to force people to pay attention, and it's ultimately going to land him an opportunity. As you can see how passionate he is, he's going to crush an interview. He gets you in a room, he's going to captivate them. You can see that right now. You know, he's no nonsense. He's about his business, and he knows the game, and he knows what he wants and how he wants to go about it. And I think this experience, being around all these different coaches from these different backgrounds, is going to expose him to a lot of things that's going to arm him with even more information to be able to go into one of these interviews and wow, a front office or ownership group and land him a job. So Joe Witt Jr. is my candidate, with Cliff Kingsbury being a close second. But I wouldn't be shocked if one of our specialist coaches or one of our assistant coaches gets poached next year for a coordinator job. Gearcell 1, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Gearcell 1 writes, definitely love what AP and DQ are doing, laying a solid foundation. Just saw Smoot and Cooley in Wyoming at the Cattle Prod Yoga Pants Hip Hop Groove Pool Party. Tragic. You definitely probably saw Cooley there. I don't know if you will catch Smoot all the way out there in Wyoming, but that's funny. I knew some yoga pants was going to be in there somewhere. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, sup, Lou? Sup, video channel. Give me Joe Witt's 18 men over Ron's 40 any day. Excited to see how this defense looks on third down blitzes. I can't wait to see what this whole thing looks like. I mean, I just knowing what a Dan Quinn defense has looked like over the years and getting this Joe Witt Jr. twist on it with Jason Simmons, I'm as excited about a defense as I can recall being. Again, you probably got to take me all the way back to Greg Williams' defenses. We haven't had any type of defensive coordinating chops since Greg Williams. I think the last half-decent defensive coordinator that we had that got us any results was Greg Bloch. But you got to go all the way back to Greg Williams. I think Bloch replaced him after he left because he thought he was going to get the job when Joe retired, and he didn't. So he was upset, and rightfully so. He didn't get the job, and I think Bloch took over the defense when he left, and that was the last time the defense was any good under Greg Bloch for a couple of years. And then you had the Zorn. I think he was under Zorn for a couple of years, and then once Shanahan came in, everybody got cleared out. And Shanahan never had good defenses here in Washington, and I think he had Jim Haslett as his coordinator. That was a disaster. You want to talk about blitzing? He was over aggressive, too damn aggressive. And then after that, I think we had Mr. Strike iron and cracked skulls. Greg Minuski after that, which was an abject disaster. And then I think it was Joe Barry after that. And yeah, it's been a nightmare for us with defensive coordinators. This is the first one where I'm like, yo, I am so stoked for what's to come from a defensive standpoint. Like generally, I want the offense on the field. I'm more comfortable with the offense on the field, and that's probably never going to change because theoretically speaking, you shouldn't be in a position where you're capable of giving up points when you're on offense, right? If your offense does nothing but go 3 and out and punt the ball, you shouldn't be giving up any points. So when the offense is on the field, I kind of exhale because even if the offense is trash and I don't expect anything of it, I don't expect you to turn it over and put us in a bad spot. It happens, and it happened quite a bit last year with the pick sixes and the fumbles and all of that stuff. But generally speaking, I'm more comfortable when the offense is on the field. I'm probably going to be more excited when the defense is on the field this year. I'll still be looking forward to the offense, but I'm looking forward to seeing this defense create turnovers, something we just don't do in Washington and haven't done in Washington. I'm looking forward to this group getting after teams, creating turnovers. It's something that Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. have just historically done at a high clip. The Cowboys were among the best in the league the last 3 years since Joe Witt Jr. and Dan Quinn took over. They created turnovers at an alarming rate. They led the league over that 3-year span. Like, it's what Dallas did under Joe Witt Jr. or under Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. So I'm looking forward to a lot of that transferring over to Washington. I saw what they did with DaRon Bland. I saw what they did with Trayvon Diggs. And I'm like, yeah, do that for our guys too. And we got dogs. They brought in Mike Sainstill. We already got Emmanuel Forbes who's supposed to be able to take it away. What's the difference between DaRon Bland and Emmanuel Forbes Jr. other than, Emmanuel Forbes is a toothpick, sure. But their skill sets are very similar. So the reason why DaRon Bland didn't go until the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round or wherever he was drafted. I think he can do it personally. So I'm excited. Can't wait to see what it looks like either. DMV Bay. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, so I'm hearing that Bobby Johnson is super ass and a terrible hire. Is this true? And why would we hire such a terrible O-line coach? So that's word out on the street. Yeah. If you go in Buffalo, he was mid. With the Giants, he was awful. If you listen to their fan base. And so I'm hoping third time's a charm. Most people that you talk to are saying that from the fan bases where he previously coached are saying 3 strikes and you out. Y'all about to get what we got. And y'all going to be singing the same song we was singing. Like, can't wait to get this guy out of here. I'm hoping that the third time's the charm for him. We'll find out if he's a good coach or not. This is the thing that was alarming a bit to me, which makes me think maybe he just got a bad rap. He was hired. Like, they didn't have to hire. It's not like in past years where nobody wanted to come to Washington and you had to take what you can get. They hired him. He was one of the earlier hires with this staff. And they didn't have to hire him. There were offensive line coaches that were available. They could have gone in a number of different directions. And they decided to hire O-line Bobby Johnson. And I think he was surprised. He said, look, when I got the call, I told him I was so stoked, I'd run to Ashburn, right? But I wonder if they see something in him that, a lot of fans and others don't. I know he's a teacher. I do know that. I know he's a motivator. I've seen clips, little hit pieces. Well, not hit pieces. I've seen little, pieces that, local news stations have done on him. I've watched those clips. it's a results-based business. He didn't get results with the Giants. They were awful. You could blame him if you want. The players weren't very good, though. So we'll see. But yes, right now, word out on the street is yes, he's ass. He's going to have to prove that he's not. He's going to have to prove that he's not. And they don't think he's a terrible O-line coach, obviously, or they wouldn't have hired him. So something has to give. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Chris, writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the fam. Likewise, as always. And once again, thank you for your generosity and your support. Can't thank you enough. Really appreciate you. He says, 2 questions. How many games do you objectively give the O-line and Daniels to mesh before you are concerned, and why? And 2, who is the most underrated or underappreciated player on the team now, and why? I told you I'm not going to put a time frame on anything this season. I'm just going to allow the process to play itself out. We may not be pleased with the O-line at all at any point this season, right? We may go into next season saying that by far and away, offensive line is the biggest and most glaring need that this team has, and they have to address it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That may be the case. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to, be overly emotional about anything. I told you, I'm going to just enjoy this ride this season. I've been through this enough to know that the best way to go about a season like the one we're about to embark upon is no expectations. Don't put any numbers on anything. Just have fun. Enjoy it. And everything won't be enjoyable. I'm aware. Okay. Some things will be frustrating, but that's what year one of a recalibration looks like. All right. They can call it whatever they want, but this is them hitting the reset button. When you have the highest turnover rate of any team in the league from the roster standpoint, from last year's to this year's team, you're not telling me that it's not a reset or a rebuild, or you can call it a recalibration, call it whatever you want. But they're definitely going to, we can't be much worse than we were last year. We won 4 games last season. So I'm expecting vast improvement. I'm expecting this team to be way more competitive than it was a season ago. But I don't know if the offensive line is going to be, tremendously better than it was last year. I expect it to be better. Tyler Biadasz is better than anything we had at center last year. Not even close. I don't know what Nick Allegretti is as a starter. I know what he was as a platoon player. As a backup, he was very, very good. Chiefs fans have told us, hey, you're going to love this guy. He's tough as nails, very reliable. When we put him in there was, wasn't this massive drop-off. That's cool, but Giants fans also told us the same thing about Nick Gates, and look at how that turned out. So, now granted, Nick Allegretti played in the Super Bowl. Nick Gates, played in the toilet bowl against us, right? So it's a little bit different. But we'll see what Allegretti is. We'll see what Brandon Coleman is. We'll see if the moves that they've made yield us substantial upgrades or not. But whether it gels or meshes in year one or not, we'll see. I'm going to just let it play out. I'm not going to put an actual, time frame on it. But I'm looking forward to seeing it all come together. And as I've mentioned, and I'll say this again, and I'm going to continue to harp on this, Jaden Daniels' legs and the way they utilize him is going to take pressure off of this offensive line. They don't have to be perfect. If you were blocking for, say, Mac Jones, or like last year when, even though I think a lot of the principles that they did offensively put the line and the quarterback in harm's way, they still weren't very good in certain situations. Like, you shouldn't have pressure that quick. That's ridiculous. But getting the ball out quickly, which I expect them to do this year, using Jaden Daniels as a runner and the threat of him as a runner is going to, force defenses to kind of be on their heels a bit and not on their toes and getting after you. So I think it's going to help the offensive line, but we'll see. The most underrated or underappreciated player on the team now, and why? That is a great question. To be underappreciated, that means you have had to have been here, for a number of years, and because it's hard to be underappreciated if you just got here. You know, we don't even know what you're going to provide for us. It's got to be a player that's been here, and I assume that player has to have been here for 3 or 4 years, right? So, with that said, I think there's probably a list of maybe 3 or 4 guys that probably fit that criteria. I think Jeremy Reeves is in that discussion. I think a lot of fans give him his just due, but I don't think a number of fans do give him his just due as a special teams player. We saw how special teams really suffered last year when he went out of the lineup. So I think his role is pretty big. I think Defoe, you know, kind of out of sight, out of mind. You know, he had a really strong 2022. Didn't get off to the best of starts in 2023, but who's to say that he wouldn't have finished the season strong had he stayed healthy? You know, but we'll see what happens with him. I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about him already, which is crazy. But he's also in a contract year. This is his last year of his deal, if I'm not mistaken. He was in that same draft with Cosme and all of those guys. So I think he's playing for a contract this year as well. So we'll see if he, is able to provide himself with an opportunity to earn. So he's another guy that I would put in that conversation. I think Cornelius Lucas is very underappreciated for what he's been able to provide us for the 3 or 4 years that he's been here. That stability at swing tackle is invaluable. Like, you need that in this league. And for a team like us who just has had a revolving door at tackle, and even when you've had guys out there that have been solid, like Charles Leno Jr. was, still hasn't been good enough. It's invaluable to have a guy like a Cornelius Lucas be able to step in and stabilize that position for you in the event of injuries. So I think that's another name of a guy that's been, really good. And then I think you could probably go with one of the receivers. I'll leave them out of this conversation. I think John Bates is underappreciated because he doesn't catch the ball. What he does isn't sexy, but you need guys that can block. Like, your run game ain't gonna work if you can't block in a run game, and he does that, right? So I think he's a little bit underappreciated. And then I'll give you one more player that I think is somewhat underappreciated. I think Brian Robinson Jr. is a little bit underappreciated. And here's why I say that. I think most fans understand that he just wasn't given enough opportunities, and he's really good. But I think a lot of fans were super excited when they brought in Austin Eckler. And part of the reason they brought in Austin Eckler is because, and I don't want to forget this, let me say this quickly before my guy Derek B beats me up. Brian Robinson Jr. is not a great pass protector. So part of the reason they brought in Austin Eckler is to help in those situations as well. So I want to make sure I say that, because I always leave that part of the discussion out. I always go straight to pass catching, and that's half the battle on third downs. You got to be able to protect the quarterback. And Brian Robinson Jr. has not been great at that to this point of his career. And not that he can't be better, but he hasn't been great. So that is something to consider. But I think a lot of people just assume he's not a great pass catcher. Like, there's this narrative that exists that he's not great catching the ball out of the backfield. I thought he showed a lot last year that he can provide something as a pass catcher. And I think he's been showing that. He had to catch and run against the Falcons for a touchdown. He had to catch, against the Seahawks, where he extended and ran up the sideline and caught it and ran for the touchdown. I think, he had to screen for a touchdown against the Falcons last year. He had the screen that almost popped for a touchdown against the Broncos. I think he can be effective in the screen game. I think he can be effective as a pass catcher. He just needs more opportunities. That's always been my biggest issue with the staff with Brian Robinson in regards to Brian Robinson. He just needs more opportunity. So I'd say he's pretty underrated for what he provides as well. You forced me to pick one guy out of that entire mix, and I'd probably say it'd be one of the guys that doesn't show up on the stat sheet enough. So I'd say it'd be like a Jeremy Reeves, right? Because he just plays special teams for the most part. You know, he's the personal protector. Some of the hidden yards that you see, he might not be the guy to actually down the ball, but he might be the guy that goes down and taps it and stops it from getting into the end zone. He's a guy that makes tackles on special teams, but half the time, you know, a lot of people don't even pay attention to who's making the tackles on special teams, right? Reeves, we had a punt block last year when he got hurt. We had like 3 other kicks that should have been blocked. I don't like guys where literally they were scared to stretch out because if they, you know, didn't block it and they hit the kicker, it'd be roughing the kicker. So they were scared. But you're like, bro, you should have blocked it. It was one guy, Tress, I don't know how the dude laid out and it went right through his arms. Like Tress should have had 4 kicks blocked last year. It was an adventure last year when he got back there to kick. It was a nightmare. And not having him back there as that personal protector to make sure everything, you know, guys were lined up where they were, so weren't these breakdowns. We had so many breakdowns last year. So many. I was always nervous because I was always listening for that double tap because I'm like, they about to block this shit. Like I always had an uneasy feeling. And guys like him make sure that those kind of breakdowns don't happen. And so I'd say it's a guy like Jeremy Reeves, All-Pro Revo. But there's a number of guys that I think you could choose from, and I've given you a lot of the names, right? Nike, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Nike writes, hey, what's up, Lou? With the trip, if you were to bring a significant other, would you have to pay for 2? Yes. Yes. You do have to pay for 2. I'm going to have, I'm putting together a flyer right now so I can give more information and be consistent with that. But I would encourage you to bring a significant, like, it's cool to kick it with me and have fun, but you still, when you're not kicking it with me, you still want to have time to spend. Like, this is an opportunity. Like, I know, you know, what's crazy is it's a scam, right? So doing the timeshares is sort of a scam, right? It's sort of scammy because how often are you actually going to use your timeshare? And that's why they give you these free trips to try to entice you to come to, you know, so they can get you in a room, and then they try not to take no for an answer. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these timeshare trips where they're like, yeah, just come out, you get a free trip, yada, yada. All you got to do is pay for this. And, you know, it'd be like $30. And then you go there and it's actually nice and you have a good time, but you got to come to this meeting, right? And they're selling you on this timeshare and they do a hell of a job selling you. And they tell you, you know, travel is important. Vacation is important. And the of all the shit that they say, that is true. That's the one thing that is true. Vacation is important. You need to spend time with your family. You need to carve out. We work so hard as individuals, as human beings, as family. We work so hard. And sometimes we don't take an opportunity to exhale and enjoy the fruits of our labor and enjoy it with the ones that we love. I think creating memories is one of the best things you can do, right? It's one of the best things you can do. Like, when my kids get older, I want to be able to say, you remember the time we went here or there? Or, you know, me and my sisters, we still trip off of, remember when we did this? Or my mom or my dad, remember when we did this? Like, that's half of the fun of a cookout, is just recalling some shit that we did back in the day. Or when we went here, remember when this happened, when we went there? I think it is important to have those opportunities to create those new memories. So I would endorse anyone that is thinking about coming. Bring a significant other. Bring somebody with you if you can. If you're coming by yourself, that's cool too. We're going to have a blast. And I'm going to make sure you enjoy yourself. Whether you come with somebody else or you come with 3 or 4 other people or you come by yourself, I'll make sure you have a great time. But yeah, I would definitely bring a significant other. And yes, you have to pay for both. Absolutely. But I'll have more information on that. But for those of you unaware of what I'm even referring to, LouieTeeNetwork Lifestyle presents the Dominican Republic edition. We are going to the DR next June, the 26th through the 30th. We're going to have a blast. We're staying on a resort. We're going to do so many different things. We're going to have so much fun. It'll be my first time getting out of the house. I keep talking about getting out of the house and meeting you guys. This is the first time that we're going to have that opportunity. Looking forward to meeting a lot of y'all and chopping it up, turning up, having a good time, having some drinks, being competitive. As I mentioned, we're going to go bowling, going to do some laser tagging, probably do some water stuff. There are other things, I got a conversation that, an intimate conversation that you can have with me. You can ask me anything, right? And this is the only time I'm doing this. I'm not doing this on no other trips where you can get me in a room and we can talk about anything. You can ask me any question you want. And as long as almost everything is within reason, right? It's only, certain questions like, bro, come on now. What are we doing here? But I don't expect anybody to ask me no crazy stuff like that. But just about everything is inbounds, right? And I'm gonna give you an honest answer, right? So we're gonna have a blast. I'm looking forward to it. And so the link is down in the description of this video for you to register. And then Miss Perry, Miss P has been putting the link in the chat for you guys. And I got to do a better job of putting the link in the comment section and pinning it at the top, because I always say I'm gonna do it, then I never go back and do it. So I need to do a better job of doing that. But I'm looking forward to it. And hopefully, Nike, you'll be joining us on the trip. You and your significant other. I hope to see you guys there, man. Looking forward to it. We're gonna have a blast. But anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. I see Leaf O World says Defoe only played one season. He played 2 seasons. The first season, he wasn't as productive. He was more of a backup, but he got a little bit of shine. That one season that you're referring to is 2022. He played really, really well, though. Similar to Sam Cosmi, right? I mean, if we go on that route, Sam Cosmi's really only played 1 full season. Like, he's played in other seasons. He's been the starter, but he's been in and out of the lineup. He's been very inconsistent. Last year was his first season of consistently playing the right guard position, not platooning back and forth between tackle and guard, not being in and out of the lineup. He stayed healthy and he kicked ass last year. Same thing you could say about Defoe in 2022, right? And we were looking forward to seeing him do it again in 2023, and he didn't follow up. Not early in the season, at least, before he got injured. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of Command Post Live. Looking forward to chopping it up with y'all. I'm going to talk more about that documentary that the NFL is doing, that in-depth look, if you will, at the draft process from this past year. And the pick is in. That's going to be phenomenal. And again, Washington is one of the teams that is going to be starring in that series, along with Chicago and Arizona and the Rams. I think are the 4 teams that they really followed throughout that process. And they've been dropping little tidbits to give us an idea that, like the Rams, remember we saw the little clip of Les Snead on the phone with Adam Peters talking about, what they were going to do, kind of filling out. And he's like, well, looks like we won't be getting Jaden Daniels, right? Because that was his way of saying, well, they're going to be drafting Jaden Daniels, right? So we got that little clip, and I think that's going to be in the documentary as well, along with all of the different things that, they put out a little hype video for it, and that was great. But we'll talk more about it on the podcast. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Until next time, you guys Have a good one. We will be live Thursday night. NBA Finals is Wednesday, so we'll be back to our original slot Thursday night. Look forward to chopping it up with you then. We'll have a lot to talk about then because if I'm not mistaken, OTA, that mandatory mini should be wrapping up right around that time if he gives them that final day off. Normally, it's 3 days, and that last day, the coach will be like, you guys have earned it. You had a great offseason period. You take the last day off. Dan Quinn might be like, to hell with that shit. Y'all got a whole month and a half, off after this shit. Y'all didn't get no days off. We need all 3 of these periods. Sorry, not sorry, but we'll see what happens. Either way, we'll have some more to discuss, and we should be hearing from not only the staff, but some more players and maybe some more coaches as well. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Everybody might be trying to get out of there on some last day of school type shit. Ain't nobody giving no interviews. We might not hear from them at all, but either way, we'll have some things to discuss. So I'll see you on Thursday. Until then, you guys take care. God bless. Good night.